Yo, what's up, everyone? This is Terry again. I'm going to be bringing you my rewatch show where I was able to rewatch the Ohio State versus Youngstown State game. Obviously, when you watch the game for a second time and you already know the outcome, you can pay attention to different things. I was able to do that, and I caught on to a couple of things I want to talk about here. Also, a couple more things. I'm going to give my top 10 in college football after week 2, and then we're going to look and see who's the best running back duo in the Big Ten so far. So let's get into it here. The first thing, like I said, what I learned. I'm going to start with the quarterbacks. That's the thing that everybody always likes to talk about. And you can even learn a lot from the quarterbacks when you rewatch games. So um, the first thing I noticed was that with Kyle McCord, for the most part, he made the routine throws look routine, which is what Ryan Day said that he wants in his quarterback. So I think Ryan Day has a press conference later today. We'll see if he names Kyle McCord the full-time starter or not. I'm not so sure of that. If you watched my video yesterday, you would see why. I kind of gave some points there. But go watch it if you haven't. Again, with Kyle McCord, it seemed like they ran a lot of like RPOs and quick game throws. They wanted him to just make the decision and get the ball out of his hands pretty quickly. The one thing that stood out to me, I saw a chart posted of like all of his throws. He was 3 of 10 on balls, or sorry, 3 of 8 on balls that were thrown more than 10 yards. Obviously, 2 of those were the busted coverages to Marvin Harrison Jr. The other one was the throw down the middle to Marvin Harrison Jr. It was a dot. It came right after the ball that he threw that should have been or could have been intercepted. That was probably the only turnover worthy ball that I've seen from either quarterback. And then getting into Devin Brown, I feel like overall he actually read the defense pretty well. I think he did miss like 1 or 2 reads, which I mean that is substantial considering he only played 3 drives. But for the most part, he was making the right decision, making the decision pretty quick, and he wasn't really late with the ball. Obviously, he was a little off target with a lot of his throws, but he was on time. He was making the throws that he was supposed to make. And then the other thing I noticed with Devin Brown is that the run game is completely different. So if you have Kyle McCord out there, a lot of people are coming out now and they're saying, well, as we said before, Kyle McCord and Devin Brown are not that much different athletically. I don't necessarily think that that's true. I don't think that Devin is like, if you're talking like Kyle McCord to like Braxton Miller, okay, that's definitely not what we have here. But you have someone in Devin Brown who looks like a more natural runner and who, I mean, he's faster than Devin Brown, or he's faster than Kyle McCord, clearly, if you watch both of them play. So, and also I think he probably runs harder. So, um, anyway, what I was getting at, the run game is a lot different with Devin Brown in than with Kyle McCord. With Devin Brown, they seem a lot more multiple, where you'll get runs in different directions, different types of runs, different motions that can confuse the defense. So, I mean, overall, I do think that the run game on this team will be better if Devin Brown is the quarterback. However, it ain't looking like that. It's looking like it's going to be Kyle. So we'll see. I'm interested to see what Ryan Day has to say about that later today after he had a chance to go back and watch the film from the game. So then moving on to the offensive line is the next thing that I noticed. The offensive line actually didn't play that bad. I mean, they had a couple penalties and stuff like that. But, I mean, overall, I think I was super impressed with Josh Simmons. I know that he had a penalty. He's not perfect yet. I mean, that was his second game ever playing left tackle. And the one thing about him that stands out to me is he's super athletic. If you're asking him to get off of a block and get onto another block, he has the ability. So if he can just get more consistent with that, he's going to be a problem for teams down the road at left tackle. And I mean, again, you got someone coming in from uh, a lower level school. I think he came from like San Jose State or something like that. He's going to take some time to adjust to this level of football, but overall, I think that he has the skill set and the traits to do it. The other thing I noticed on the O-line was that Josh Fryer, this was not really his best game. I saw him missing a few blocks. So he looked pretty good the Indiana game, not the best in this game. I do think that he has the ability to be really good, so hopefully he'll continue growing also as this line continues to gel and mesh with each other. All right, moving on, moving off the offensive line. The only thing of note that I really noticed with the wide receivers was I think Carnell Tate might be the best wide receiver route runner on this team. He was running some crispy routes. He was getting separation, getting open. I hope to see more of him. Obviously, we have Julian Fleming as that third receiver, but rotate him in, get Carnell Tate out there, and let that young kid shine because he deserves it. I mean, you could tell he's put in a crazy amount of work to get his route running to be as good as it is. He had one drop ball the first game, none this game. So, I mean, get that kid out there and let him work. Let's see here. Moving on to the next one. All right, so this is something I didn't notice in the when I watched the game the first time, but really stood out to me when I rewatched it was the defensive line is actually dominant. A lot of people have been talking this week about the defensive ends and how they're not getting pressure. Look, when I watch that defensive line looks dominant. They're controlling the line of scrimmage. The ends are getting. I mean, they're getting there, but the ball's getting out a little quicker than they would expect. That'll change in some of these bigger games, like I'm sure Notre Dame. They're going to be doing some more traditional dropbacks, and then the interior is just dominating completely. Ty Hamilton is, I mean, that he's probably one of my favorite players on this defense now, man. He gets up in the defender's face and he gets off of it and gets to the ball. I'm loving what he's doing. I'm loving what Tyleik Williams is doing this year. He had a play against Youngstown State where they threw a screen. He identified it and hit the guy as soon as he caught the ball. I mean, that's an NFL play. I love that from him. So I just want to continue seeing the defensive line get better. And I really think that the perception of this defensive line is going to change this year once we start getting into some tougher games where teams are going to be doing more traditional dropbacks. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But both games, I watched the game and didn't think the defensive line was great. And then once I rewatched it, I'm like, okay, never mind. These guys are wreaking havoc. They're causing problems for everyone. So again, I expect to see that going forward. Another thing that I noticed was when Youngstown State was in 11 personnel. So when they had one running back, one tight end, and three receivers on the field, Ohio State was running a personnel package most of the time where Sonny Styles was not on the field. Now, they were doing okay with this package, but I don't know if I like it because I don't want the other team to be able to control whether Sonny Styles is on the field or not. I think he's potentially the best defender on the team. We'll see how how it plays out, but I mean, having him off the field is not something I'm looking forward to if that's the plan for every time they do 11 personnel. Basically, our defensive backs were Lathan Ransom, Jordan Hancock, Davis Nigbanosin, Denzel Burke, and Jahad Carter in this package. Which I mean, they were doing pretty good. They were making plays, but again, I don't want to see Sonny really come off the field. So that's something I'll be watching for in the next game with Ohio State playing Western Kentucky, a team that a lot of the times has a quarterback in like the top 3 or 5 in terms of overall yards passing because they're a pass-heavy team, and they kind of have some good concepts and good receivers. So it'll be interesting to see this weekend. Another thing that really kind of threw me off that I wasn't expecting was I saw a lot of the defensive ends dropping into coverage, and this was mostly JTT or JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. I don't know how I feel about it. I know that we were sending a lot of pressure up the middle and having the defensive ends drop out, but I mean the defensive ends are taking heat right now from people who make content, the beat people and things like that about not getting pressure. But a lot of the times they're having them drop out of coverage or drop out of the pass rush and into coverage. And I mean obviously it's not more they're not dropping into coverage more than they're getting the chance to rush after the quarterback. But still, that's something that we are doing. So keep that in mind when you don't see the defensive ends getting pressure. And then the last thing that I noticed was also on the defensive side of the ball was just Lathan Ransom. I didn't really think that he had played his best game this game. I didn't notice it necessarily during the game, but once I went back and rewatched it, there were multiple times where he kind of missed his run fill, was not the best in coverage. He was kind of off in the playing off and then getting beat to the outside or inside. I think Lathan's a good player, and I want to see him keep getting better as the year goes on. I'm not really too concerned about him. I felt like he played good last year. Made a couple mistakes in the biggest games, the Michigan game and the Georgia game. But overall, I felt like he was a good player, and I think that he's going to be a good player for Ohio State this year. So I'm not too worried about it, but he definitely needs to get that cleaned up. All right, so let's transition here. We're going to move on to the running back. So a big subject of conversation prior to the season starting this year was the best running back duo in the Big Ten. You know me, an Ohio State fan. I'm like, it's going to be Ohio State because we have the best running back in the Big Ten, in my opinion, Travion Henderson. And I was basing it off of his freshman year. Obviously, he had some issues last year with injuries and whatnot, but Travion Henderson put together a season in his freshman year that was better than any of the running backs that I'm about to mention have put together so far. Maybe Blake Corum's last year was better, but if it was just barely better. So what I wanted to get into, I looked at the yards per carry, touchdowns, and then I kind of took the top three teams. So Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State are the ones who were in this conversation. If there is another Big Ten team that has a running back duo as good as these guys, I'm not adding them in here because I don't think that team can beat Ohio State, Penn State, or Michigan. So this is the teams I'm going with. So to go down the list, for Ohio State, you have Travion Henderson at 6.1 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. Chip Trayanum at 5.5 yards per carry, 0 touchdowns. 5.8 yards per carry overall for the Ohio State running backs. And that's the top 2 carries. So the 2 running backs with the most carries on these 3 teams is the ones that I used, which is on all 3 teams, it is their best running backs. So no issue there. Michigan, Blake Corum, 6.1 yards per carry, 4 touchdowns. Donovan Edwards, 2.6 yards per carry. I haven't watched Michigan this year, but 2.6 yards per carry is terrible. And I thought that Donovan Edwards was potentially the best running back in the Big Ten. I mean, last year, I thought he was going to be the best running back on that team at least. But 2.6 yards per carry and 0 touchdowns for Donovan Edwards is terrible. Michigan's overall average for those 2 backs, 4.4 yards per carry. And then moving on to Penn State. Penn State has 2 really good running backs that are both true sophomores. So I think they both went over 1,000 yards last year. So I know they were kind of talking their talk in the offseason about how they have the 2 best running backs. So they have Katron Allen at 5.3 yards per carry with 1 touchdown, and Nicholas Singleton at 4.7 yards per carry with 4 touchdowns. So 5.0 yards per carry overall for Penn State for those 2 backs. So I mean, it's close. You know, all those running backs, they've played pretty much similar competition, and the stats are not too far off. So I mean, Penn State, between those 2, you got 5 touchdowns. Michigan 4, Ohio State 2. You know, Ohio State has Mayan Williams, who they also put in the game, who has 2 touchdowns also. And they use Chip Trayanum as a blocker in that situation. So, I mean, overall, on this list, it looks like Blake Corum's probably having the best season so far for the running backs. Chip Trayanum's probably the best football player on this list, in my opinion. Or maybe Donovan Edwards. I don't know what he's doing this year, but you know, Chip Trayanum does a lot of blocking, catching out of the backfield. I'm going to put my stamp down, though, an Ohio State fan. We're averaging the most yards per carry with our 2 running backs. Only 2 touchdowns, but that's because we let Mayan get in there. We kind of have a 3-headed monster at Ohio State. I'm going to say Ohio State has the best running back duo in the Big Ten so far. And I'm going to go ahead and predict that by the end of the year, that's going to be Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton, because I think those are 2 of the best running backs in the Big Ten when combined with each other. All right, so I'm going to move on from that, and then I'm get to my last subject here. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter and things like that putting out their top 10 for each week. I think I want to make that one of my segments every week, and then kind of elaborate on a couple teams on why I have them there. So getting into my top 10, some of them I'm not going to elaborate on. So first I have Georgia. Georgia I'm going to keep them at number 1, and as long as they keep winning and looking decent, I mean, again, I think they're gonna mesh. And Kirby Smart won back-to-back national championships. They really got to lose, or something crazy has to happen for me to take them out of the 1 spot. My next one, number 2, is going to be Florida State. A lot of people have Texas over Florida State, which I have Texas at 3. Florida State beat LSU, and I'm not convinced that LSU is not a better football team than Alabama. So I'm not going to jump Texas up because they beat Alabama, the big name that everybody wants to talk about. So Texas is my number 3. I just kind of explained it. They looked good against Alabama, but Alabama also made a lot of mistakes that were not necessarily things that Texas caused. It was just bad mistakes. My number 4, this one's probably going to surprise some people. I have USC. USC has played 3 games so far. Their offense, to me, is probably the best offense in the country. They have Zachariah Branch, who is a weapon no matter when he gets the ball, where he gets the ball. He can take it to the house at any time. Probably one of the most dynamic, if not the most dynamic player in college football. Um, and everybody says like USC's defense is terrible, which the first game they did look terrible. The last 2 games they gave up 14 and 10 points, which is not great because they played, um, I think, Nevada and Stanford. I could be wrong about Nevada, but anyway, they played a really bad team and they played Stanford. 14 and 10 points though. With the offense that they have, if that defense is holding bad teams to below 14 points, I mean, that's going to be a problem for teams, because if when you're playing USC, if their offense is as good as I think it is, with the best player in the country, Caleb Williams, and like I said, probably the most dynamic player in Zachariah Branch, if their defense can just get a couple stops, they can win. They can win against anybody. Now, moving on to number 5, I have Michigan at number 5. Michigan hasn't looked super impressive, but they've been really good the last 2 years. I'll keep them at 5. They haven't done anything bad, or like came close to losing a game, nothing like that. I have next on the list. I have Penn State. I think Penn State's been super impressive. They're gonna have to beat somebody of note for me to move them up into, like, let's say, the top 4 because of James Franklin's track record. I mean, he has to win a big game for me to believe that he can win a big game. I think they can this year with Drew Aller at quarterback, but we'll see how that plays out because we haven't seen him against a big time opponent in a game, maybe on the road, things like that. So my next one on the list is going to be Notre Dame. I have Notre Dame ranked ahead of Ohio State because they've looked better than Ohio State. I know that Ohio State is a team that's typically been good, but right now the offense for Ohio State is averaging under 30 points a game. The defenses look solid, but until they can show me something impressive to where I'm like, okay, that looks like a team that can actually compete, I'm going to have Ohio State right where they're at, which is number 8. Again, I already elaborated on that, so I'm just going to move over to the next one. Number 9, I have Washington. Super impressive offense. It's another team that they're going to have to beat someone in order for me to keep moving them up. We'll see how it plays out. They got a really good quarterback over there, and a really good offensive coordinator. So, if you have that with Washington, who's always typically had a decent defense, that can be a dangerous team. Obviously, they have Michael Penix, the quarterback that transferred from Indiana, and he's been lighting it up. A lot of people are looking at him in the draft, this upcoming draft. So, and then I'm going to get to my last team here. I have Alabama at number 10. Obviously, Alabama lost to Texas. So keeping them in the top 10 is kind of shaky. I thought about it, but looking at the teams after them, I don't think that those teams would beat Alabama or are better than Alabama. So I'm going to keep them at number 10, and I think that they could really make a run this year. A lot of people want to count them out because why wouldn't we want to count out the team that's been whooping up on everybody for the last 15 years or whatever? But I really think that they can make a run if they cannot lose themselves or make mistakes to make them lose like they did against Texas. All right, so that's going to be it for my show here. I'm going to wrap this up. Check out all my videos. Leave a like, leave a comment. Obviously, hit the subscribe button if you enjoy it. Come back for more content. Have a good day.